Literally translated, it gives the half-civilized ones, which told the story of a young man from Charlevoix who settled in Quebec City, fell in love, and started up an intellectual review with the financial assistance of his girlfriend's father. Through his characters, Harvey denounced the conduct and ideas of those he called the half-civilized ones, as well as the enslavement of minds by those he called the intelligence bootleggers. He also attacked what he termed the putrid bladder of their hypocrisy, as well as their constraint on freedoms of thought. Here are a few passages. The Bible should be placed on the index because of the many crude passages that may frighten the less modest. Doubt is the very basis of knowledge, since it is the essential condition of the search for truth. And you are often told that it is prohibited to think freely. The authors of such a vile decree are greatly guilty. One could find no better way to kill individual work in the name of who knows what collective mediocrity, which is encouraged for the sole benefit of a case, on the false pretext of order, tradition, and authority. So, this was way too much for the clergy. The novel was condemned by Cardinal Villeneuve, who prohibited the faithful, and I quote, on pain of committing mortal sin, from reading this book, or from keeping, lending, buying, selling, printing, or spreading it in any way. End of quote. I guess that's enough. In addition, Harvey, who had been editor-in-chief of Le Soleil, which is still a great newspaper in Quebec City now. So he was, who had been editor-in-chief of Le Soleil in Quebec City for 7 years, was forced to resign from his position at the request of the newspaper's manager, who had yielded to vehement pressure from the clergy. In 1937, Harvey founded his own militant paper called Le Jour, the Day, which, for 9 years, constantly promoted the liberation that, in his view, was more precious and real than any form of national independence, the liberation of the mind. In the pages of Le Jour, Harvey resumed the struggle for free mandatory education, which was finally enacted by the Liberal government of Adélard Godbout in 1940. He also ardently promoted women's right to vote, to which the clergy was fiercely opposed, but that the Godbout government also enacted in that same year. Jean-Charles Harvey was not only opposed to the domination of the clergy, he also vigorously fought the reactionary and fascistic tendencies of the French Canadian elites of the time, and, being strongly in favor of Canadian unity, categorically opposed any form of exclusive nationalism. He thus ran distinctly against the grain, making Le Jour, for example, the only French-language newspaper in the world that, during the Second World War, resolutely defended the French resistance and democracy against the Nazis. In his view, it was truly shameful that the French-Canadian elites opposed participation in the war. He was one of the few in Quebec at that time who clearly asserted that the true purpose of the war was to strike down the barbarism of Nazism, whereas the nationalist elite vigorously defended collaboration with the Nazis in France. On May 9, 1945, the day after the capitulation of Nazi Germany, Harvey made a striking address to the Canadian Democratic Institute in Montreal on the theme of fear. In impeccable style, he denounced the fact that, and I quote, the only power that causes everyone to tremble in this part of Canada is the clerical power, end of quote. And he openly called upon French Canadians to shake off the yoke that the clergy had placed on their minds. In a way, however, that speech may be considered Jean-Charles Harvey's swan song, because less than 1 year later, the adventure of Le Jour was over. Shortly afterward, in 1948, Paul-Émile Bordua, so you can go to the next image. Yeah, that's it. And a group of 13 persons signed the Refus Global Manifesto. So global refusal, that's the way we may translate it. Which was also a wake-up call for French Canadian society against clerical obscurantism. In particular, it stated, and I quote, "Beyond Christianity, we reach the burning human fraternity to which it has become a closed door," end of quote. Bordua too died in exile in Paris in 1961. The Refus Global was, in a way, the last major manifestation of the spirit of free thinking in Quebec, which at the time was under the reign of the Great Darkness, the name given to the period when the clerico-nationalist Maurice Duplessis, a corrupt, reactionary despot who defeated the modernizing government of the liberal Adélard Godbout in the 1944 election, held power until his death in 1959. It was moreover at that time that the so-called Quiet Revolution started in Quebec, but that is another story. As an epilogue to this brief survey, you may wonder what is left in Quebec society today of the action and contribution of these free thinkers. Their legacy has essentially been set aside by the nationalist orthodoxy that has taken control of official history education in Quebec. Today in Quebec, the memory of the fascist and racist reactionary Lionel Groulx, as well as that of a number of other leading figures of the clerico-nationalist ideology, is enshrined in a number of streets and institutions that bear their names. Today, virtually no one in Quebec knows the names of Fleury Mesplet or Godefroy Langlois. Honoré Beaugrand, Arthur Buis, Louis Fréchette, and Jean-Charles Harvey are vaguely known for a very limited portion of their literary work, which is sometimes vaguely mentioned in colleges and university literature departments. But their thinking and struggles for fundamental freedoms still remain completely unknown, because knowledge of them deeply calls into question the reductive and debilitating vision of history that nationalist orthodoxy has managed to impose on Quebec. And yet, it is to these persistent freethinkers that Quebecers owe the freedoms they enjoy today. Without them, for example, free mandatory education and secularism, which has become an important value in Quebec, would have taken much longer to see the light of day. It is ultimately they who have enabled French Canadian society to emerge from the backwardness it suffered for so long. So in that sense, history, not official history, but real history, as it actually was, has proven them right. On the essential points, these free thinkers have therefore won. What remains to be done is to fight for their memory to achieve the full recognition it deserves. For my part, I hope to have contributed to that end, if only to a small extent, by this presentation. Thank you.